It was 7 in the morning when Mohammed bin Zayed's phone rang. The call came from Riyadh, from Mohammed bin Salman, and it came 3 hours late, 3 hours after the UAE had publicly announced the Abraham Accords with Israel, the first Gulf state to normalize relations with Israel in the modern era, and MBS had no idea it was coming. What MBS said in that call? 4 words that captured everything. The Gulf Cooperation Council was founded in 1981. 6 states: Saudi Arabia, UAE, Kuwait, Bahrain, Qatar, and Oman. After Iran's Islamic Revolution, the Gulf monarchies needed each other, and the Saudi-UAE partnership was the core of it all. In the 1980s, that brotherhood was real, not because of paperwork or institutions, but because the threats were shared and the interests were genuinely aligned. When you face the same enemy, friendship is built on solid ground. Then came the Arab Spring of 2010 and 2011. The UAE declared the Muslim Brotherhood an existential threat, immediately without hesitation. MBZ's intelligence services had already been mapping Brotherhood cells operating inside the UAE itself. Saudi Arabia's response was far more complicated. The Saudi religious establishment had deep historical ties to Brotherhood ideology. So Saudi Arabia made distinctions, supporting some branches, tolerating others, opposing specific ones. In 2015, both countries entered Yemen together, but their objectives were never the same. Saudi Arabia wanted to restore the internationally recognized government and secure its southern border. The UAE wanted something else: control of southern Yemen, a maritime presence in the Gulf of Aden, a strategic foothold along one of the world's most important shipping corridors. The UAE backed the Southern Transitional Council, a separatist group that directly contradicted Saudi Arabia's stated goal of restoring the legitimate government. Same coalition, 2 opposing strategies. August 2020, the UAE normalized relations with Israel, alone, without coordinating with Saudi Arabia. Why? Because MBZ knew, if he told MBS beforehand, this would no longer be a UAE achievement. It would become a joint Saudi-UAE project, and the credit would shift toward Riyadh. MBZ took the credit alone. MBS picked up the phone at 7 in the morning and said those 4 words: today, what exists between these 2 countries is what analysts call a managed rivalry. Not open hostility, not genuine partnership. Something in between. GCC membership continues. Bilateral trade continues. But underneath the surface, Dubai competes with Neom. Abu Dhabi's financial center competes with Riyadh's. Even their approaches to China are structurally different. Saudi Arabia pursuing deeper strategic alignment, the UAE carefully balancing between East and West to protect Dubai's role as a global hub. Both governments understand the cost of letting this rivalry spiral out of control. Regional stability is the foundation that both Vision 2030 and UAE's diversification programs depend on. So the management continues, because the alternative is too expensive for both sides. From brothers to rivals. 5 key moments, 1 trajectory. That 7 in the morning phone call, that is the Saudi-UAE relationship today. Not the brotherhood of the 1980s, not open hostility, but 2 leaders who know each other well enough to call before dawn, and whose rivalry runs deep enough that the call itself is an accusation. American financial regulatory authorities are evaluating the specific financial intelligence implications of Chinese institutional participation in the ADGM's governance structure in the specific review that the post-ceasefire intelligence ADGM's jurisdiction. Investment arrangements involving American institutional capital, financial flows that connect American commercial interests to the specific Gulf financial infrastructure that ADGM represents. The specific Chinese governance participation in the ADGM creates a potential financial intelligence access to these specifically sensitive financial transactions that American regulatory frameworks were not designed to prevent in the specific commercial arrangement form that the Wednesday Agreement uses. The legal and regulatory gap that this creates for American intelligence and regulatory management of Chinese institutional positioning in allied financial center infrastructure is the specific policy challenge that the Wednesday Agreement's structure has exposed. IT is a challenge that American policy has not previously had to manage in this specific form because Chinese institutional positioning in allied commercial and financial infrastructure at the depth that the governance participation component of the Wednesday Agreement creates has not previously occurred in the specific commercial structure that ADGM's framework enables. The broader geopolitical significance of Chinese institutional positioning in the Gulf's most sophisticated commercial hub through the specific mechanism of the Wednesday Agreement is visible in the specific trajectory of post-conflict Gulf commercial and financial activity. Trade flows between Chinese origin commercial entities and Gulf destination markets are already being routed in proportions that reflect the specific preferential operational access that the agreement's terms create for Chinese connected commercial traffic. Financial transactions between Chinese state financial system institutions and Gulf financial centers are being structured through ADGM based entities in proportions that reflect the specific operational access and commercial terms that the financial component of the agreement creates. These shifts in commercial and financial routing are individually small in percentage terms, but large in aggregate given the scale of Chinese commercial activity that flows through the Gulf's commercial infrastructure. A 2 or 3% preferential advantage in operational costs and access for Chinese connected commercial traffic through Jebel Ali translates into specific revenue advantages for Chinese state-connected commercial entities and specific revenue advantages for Jebel Ali's operational infrastructure that reinforce the commercial logic of the strategic partnership. The reinforcing dynamic between Chinese commercial advantage and Jebel Ali's operational revenue is the specific commercial mechanism that makes the strategic partnership self-sustaining over time rather than requiring continuous renegotiation to maintain. Commercial arrangements whose terms produce mutual commercial advantage are more durable than commercial arrangements whose terms require on tenuous political will to maintain against commercial logic that would otherwise push toward alternative arrangements. The Wednesday Agreement's self-sustaining commercial logic is the specific feature that distinguishes it from the kinds of strategic commercial arrangements that American policy has historically been able to unwind through diplomatic pressure on allied commercial partners. When the commercial logic of a strategic arrangement serves the host country's commercial interests as clearly as the Wednesday Agreements, NT serves the UAE's commercial interests. American diplomatic pressure to unwind the arrangement faces the specific resistance of a commercial partner whose own commercial interests are aligned with the arrangement's continuation. MBZ knew this when he structured the Wednesday Agreement. The governance participation, financial investment, and preferential operational access components were each designed to create the specific commercial self-reinforcing dynamic that makes the arrangement durable against the specific American diplomatic pressure that the security implications of Chinese institutional positioning in allied commercial infrastructure would otherwise produce. The deal is done. China has the position. The Gulf's institutional architecture has a specific Chinese commercial hub presence that the Wednesday Agreement created, and the specific self-reinforcing commercial logic that MBZ designed into the agreement's S-structure is the mechanism that makes the presence durable rather than reversible through the specific American diplomatic pressure that the position's security implications would otherwise motivate. The UAE's secret move behind the ceasefire gave China total control of the Gulf's commercial hub in the specific institutional form that total is analytically precise about. Not physical ownership, not exclusive operational control, the specific governance participation, financial stake, and preferential operational access that constitutes the institutional form of total commercial hub influence in the specific commercial architecture that the ADGM's framework enables. China has the Gulf's commercial hub in the specific form that modern institutional positioning takes in sophisticated commercial jurisdictions. And the post-conflict Middle East that this positioning creates is the specific outcome that neither the ceasefire framework's official terms nor its diplomatic characterizations have yet acknowledged as the most consequential single commercial and strategic development of the post-conflict period. The specific lesson for American policy from the Wednesday Agreement is the most actionable element of this analysis and the one that deserves explicit articulation before the analysis concludes. American policy toward Chinese institutional positioning in allied commercial infrastructure has been developed primarily in the context of direct ownership acquisition of specific infrastructure assets. The CFIS process, the specific regulatory review mechanism that American policy uses to evaluate foreign acquisition of strategically sensitive American infrastructure, is designed to evaluate direct ownership transactions rather than governance participation structures in third country commercial frameworks. The Wednesday Agreement uses governance participation in a third country commercial framework rather than direct ownership acquisition of specific assets. It is therefore outside the specific regulatory review mechanisms that American policy has developed for evaluating Chinese institutional positioning in strategically sensitive infrastructure. American policy can respond to the Wednesday Agreement's strategic implications through diplomatic channels rather than regulatory channels, but diplomatic channels create the specific bilateral relationship costs we discussed, rather than the specific institutional barriers to implementation that regulatory review creates. The specific policy development that the Wednesday Agreement makes necessary is the extension of American institutional positioning assessment from direct ownership transactions to governance participation structures in third country commercial frameworks. This extension requires the specific regulatory and intelligence community analysis that determines which governance participation structures in which third country commercial frameworks create the specific intelligence and commercial strategic implications that the Wednesday Agreement's structure reveals. Without this extension, American policy will continue to face the specific gap between the commercial sophistication of Chinese institutional positioning in allied commercial infrastructure and the regulatory sophistication of the American mechanisms designed to assess and respond to that positioning. Chinese commercial sophistication in using third country commercial frameworks for governance participation structures will consistently exceed American regulatory sophistication in assessing that positioning as long as American regulatory tools remain calibrated to direct ownership rather than governance participation. The UAE made a secret move. China got the institutional position. The ceasefire provided the timing cover. And American policy is developing the response to a commercial structure whose specific sophistication exceeded the regulatory and intelligence frameworks designed to monitor and assess Chinese institutional positioning in strategically important allied commercial infrastructure. The Wednesday registration, the governance participation, the financial investment, the preferential operational access, the self-reinforcing commercial logic, the American regulatory gap, and the specific post-conflict gulf that contains a Chinese institutional position in the UAE's commercial hub that no external power has held since the British withdrawal of 1971. That is the deal that gave China total control of the Gulf in the specific institutional form that the Wednesday ADGM registration created, and the specific response that prevents the next version of this deal from being structured through the same regulatory gap before American policy has developed the tools to assess and manage it, is the specific policy development task that the Wednesday Agreement has made urgent.